Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Own Your Career Path to Project Management podcast. Today is a very special episode because I am joined by Cheri Smith. Cheri and I have known each other for almost a year now, and we speak pretty regularly. And during one of our times chatting together, we realized that we should probably be recording and sharing our conversations because we both realized that we were adding so much value to each other that we should share that value with our audience. So today we're going to be talking about the hidden gaps in project management that nobody talks about. I hope you enjoy today's episode.
So welcome everybody to the gap nobody talks about in project management careers. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. I'm Cheri Smith. I am the founder of Creve Company, and more specifically, the Radical Projects Collective, a community that we sponsor for experienced project managers who feel like they want to take a non-traditional path and are ready to really lead. And I am joined today by Kayla Quijas, and she will introduce herself.
Yeah, thank you, Cheri. My name is Kayla Quijas. I am a project management career transition coach. So I help professionals transition into and excel in a project management career. And I kind of have the other end of what Cheri is talking about. So I really help people who know that project management is the direction that they want to go. I help them create a strategic plan to break into it, and then continued support to help them be successful in their first 90 days and beyond, and to help them get traction, to help them get promoted, all of those things. So I am more on the front end of things. So we are super excited to have this conversation today because I also see some gaps that are kind of happening in the hiring process. So I'm going to pass it back to you to get us started, Cheri.
That sounds good. And as we were both introducing ourselves, Kayla, I was thinking, if I were listening to this, I would be wondering, why have two people who are traditionally talking to two slightly different audiences, why would you even have them co-host a conversation like this? And the reason is because Kayla and I met, I don't know, like 6 months, 8 months ago, maybe even a year.
It's a at this point. Yeah, it's been a while.
And we've talked regularly, and we always keep landing in the same spot in terms of what project managers need, the difficulties that they face with their careers, regardless of where they're at. And there's just so many similarities and things that we keep talking about in terms of confidence and visibility and positioning and career ownership. There was so much overlap and made a lot of sense for us to talk about this together.
Yeah.
So I'm going to lead off with a couple of questions for Kayla. In our work, Kayla, we both talk about these things. We talk about the positioning, strategic communication, career ownership, some of these lesser known topics. And for a project manager, this idea of positioning, anything related to marketing, for most of us feels very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But when we talk about this constellation of related attitudes and behaviors, is there a common pattern that you see for project managers, and what is that?
Insofar as breaking in and being successful and kind of what's standing in their way.
Yeah, and in the attitudes towards it, I kind of hinted at it a little bit when I talked about project managers not necessarily being comfortable with the idea of positioning. Like, I'm a generalist, I'm good at lots of different things. Why would I need to box myself in? So what kinds of attitudes and thought and patterns do you see with project managers that do hold us back?
Yeah, I see a few things. I see that generalist thing is a real challenge. I see individuals positioning themselves as general project managers, whether it's, they're breaking in or they're already in and trying to either be more successful or, transition to another company or get promoted or whatever that happens to be at that time. There's just kind of this idea of, well, if I can do more things, I'll be more helpful to more people, and then I'll get more opportunities. And that actually is counterproductive. It's counterintuitive. There's a quote out there, I think, and I don't know who it's from. If you try to appeal to everybody, you appeal to nobody. And that's exactly what it is. And it's really interesting because in my work with people who want to transition in, one of the first things I have them do is get very crystal clear on their specific niche. And I mean, we really hone in on what it is. It's not just general project manager. We go from, project manager to healthcare project manager to healthcare implementation project manager to healthcare ERP implementation project manager. And the more specific you get, the less competition you have in the market, and the more that you look like the ideal candidate to someone who is hiring for a project manager position implementing ERP systems in healthcare. So that's a little bit what I see. I also see people over optimizing for credentials rather than for their positioning, which
Mm.
is just, it feels good at the time to actually be doing something, but I see it kind of being counterproductive. So, what about you? Are you seeing similar things or like you see a different side of it?
I see similar things, and I experience that, right? Like as you're talking about the positioning and getting niching down and getting more and more narrow. Internally, I'm going, ah, because I
Right,
can
yeah.
do so many more things, right? Like, and what about all the other opportunities that are not ERP project manager in healthcare? Um, and I worry that I will miss opportunities. So why is it that that works? And does that mean that's the only thing that I can do?
hmm Yeah, really good question. So I just did a presentation to the Metro St. Louis PMI chapter yesterday, and I had everyone in the room vote. And I said, raise your hand if you're a project manager. And everybody raised their hands. And then I said, okay, if you are all positioning yourself as project managers, you are all each other's competition. So that was one thing that kind of really showed that. And then as we went through and we talked about industries and what people did specifically, I started asking, I was like, okay, who else in this room does that? And almost like no one else raised their hands. I was like, look, you are unique, you are special. And I 100% recognize that that means you can apply to fewer jobs. It also means you're the obvious choice. So I am a hiring manager for project managers at a law firm for legal project managers. And if we get applications from IT project managers, no, that's not at all what I'm looking for. I'm looking for someone who has done the project management in a law firm, specifically moving legal cases along. It's just a very different thing. So the more specific you are, the better. And I understand that it is terrifying. And when people that I work with start seeing traction, that's when I kind of see the light bulb go off.
Ah, okay. So you kind of have to try it and see that, oh yeah, this really does work.
Yeah, I think I hope the way that I explain it within my container that people do kind of see it before they try it because they're not going to try it if they don't believe it. But then the more that they start to see traction, then the more it's just kind of like a snowball or flywheel effect.
Yeah. It does where you have hiring experience. That really helps, right? Because you know how a hiring manager is thinking about it. But we all make decisions. We're even project managers who haven't yet started to hire themselves, they're not in a position where they're hiring, they can put themselves in a hiring manager's mindset because we all have to choose things, right? Like if I'm choosing where to go to eat, or I'm choosing, somebody to come in and a handyman to help me in my home. I'm you can put yourself in the mindset of someone who's making a choice. So, for the example of the handyman, if I need someone to install cabinets and I see someone who says, oh, I'm good at everything. I can build a deck in your backyard and I can add an addition on your home. I'm thinking, well, Yeah, but there's this person over here who says that they've installed 10 cabinets in the last 6 months, and they know exactly what the trade-offs are, the decisions I'm going to have to face. They know material costs because they've been buying things. Like that person's going to be able to get me where I want to go so much faster. And it's exactly the same with project manager. The more you are addressing their specific need, the more you'll stand out and they'll say, oh yeah, that's the person. The word that you use, Kayla, is undeniable. And I really like that because they can't just gloss over you. You know, if you're the 1,000th resume where they say I calm chaos, which project managers do,
Yeah.
but you know, you're just one of many, many, many people who calm chaos. But if you're that one person who has the very specific skill set that they need, and generally there's enough opportunities out there that, you know, there's not going to just be one job that is an ERP project manager in healthcare.
Correct. Absolutely.
So you're not making it so narrow that you don't qualify for anything. You're just making yourself undeniable, which is the word that you use, Kayla.
Yeah, I love that example of like the cabinets. And you want someone who specializes in cabinets. And sure, I can hire any carpenter, I can hire any contractor, but if you've done 10 kitchens just like mine in the past 6 months, then you're probably the obvious choice, right? And that person is better positioned to be more competitive in the market and actually have higher rates because they are so specific, which I think is something that that career transitioners or people wanting to get promoted or move on in their career don't really think about.
Yeah. You know, that is true. There's a lot of data behind that you do command. The more differentiated you are, the higher the rates that you tend to command. I want to talk about one thing and then we'll move on to some other topics. But, you know, this idea of generalist, I understand why project managers want to be seen for the breadth and the depth of the expertise. Like project managers, more than any other set of skills or any other role, I think has a very, very unique combination of technical expertise. We study hard for those, you know, credentials, and they're difficult to get sometimes. And we want to be seen for the expertise that we have amassed. That is a very natural desire, but you have to tamp that down because that's going to work against your actual ability to be seen as unique and be undeniable. And so you kind of have to, I think you kind of have to tell yourself, yeah, I'm pretty good.
Yeah.
I can do all these things. And I'm just going to say I can do this one thing so that people can absorb it and understand it and I can stand out.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to expand on that a little bit before we move on.
Yeah.
So I'm a legal project manager. If you were to type that into LinkedIn, you're going to get less than 1,000 people. It's very, very specific. And I think what we're talking about here about, yes, you're a project management expert and you want to be seen for that. At the same time, you have this kind of niche that you're really good at. And I do not have my Juris Doctorate. I have not been a lawyer. I have, like, before I was in this, I kind of worked on the operations side of a law firm, but was never truly in that day to day with the lawyers, you know, making sure filings were done or whatever that happens to be. And yet I am still a legal project manager because I am an expert in the industry of legal. I understand the language. I understand the stakeholders. I understand how a law firm works. That's what makes me unique and specific. And I'm actually a very specific type of legal project manager too. I do kind of different things than what other LPMs do. So, and because of that, it makes me very valuable. So the more specific that I get, the more well positioned I am for that job when it comes up.
Okay. So we all need to just kind of get comfortable with this uncomfortable fact that we do have to differentiate ourselves. We do have to position ourselves. It's essential in today's market.
Yep, absolutely.
Um, these these things that we're trying to wrap our heads around and do, like the positioning and career ownership. We'll talk about trust a little bit, how that works. These gaps, if we don't know how to do these things, if we don't understand these concepts, if we don't know how to do them, they become most acute when we're trying to land a new role, either
Mm-hmm.
in our current organizations or when we're trying to find something new. And honestly, understanding these things and building these new skill sets, sometimes it requires that we shift our mindset.
Mm-hmm.
That takes time. So if that's me right now, what are the quickest things I can do in the next few weeks? If I'm this person who's like, oh, I thought I needed to be a generalist, now I need to understand, I need to differentiate myself. I'm trying to find a new job. I got laid off. What do I do now?
Yeah. And that's the most terrifying place to be in, right? Because you need a job. So, of course, this concept of narrow down is going to sound absolutely absurd. And I will say, I have been there. I was laid off in November of 2020. It's like an awful time to get laid off, right? No one is hiring. People are not going back to work. It was just nuts. And I stayed the course and I specifically said, nope, I'm going to be a legal project manager. And it only took me 3 months, Cheri, to land a job in that environment. So there is just an example of that. So I would say what people can do specifically is just identify one project that is indicative of what your strengths are, like the type of project that is just your bread and butter, or it doesn't even have to be one you've done over and over again, just one you really were successful at, you had the right skills for, you enjoyed all of those things. Pick it and kind of lay out the scenario. What was the goal that we were trying to achieve, and why was it important? What was so particularly challenging about this one project? What are 3 things I specifically did to overcome those challenges, move the ball forward, support stakeholders, things like that? And then lay out what the outcome was after that project was over. And then as you look through it, you'll start to see your skills, the things that you're really, really good at. I also encourage people, if you are a career transitioner or let's say you need something fast, stay in your industry. That's going to be a much easier jump to make. I have this concept of like jumps and bridges and adding jumps and how that makes it difficult. So that would be the immediate steps that I would take. And again, we did this in a workshop yesterday, and it was less than 30 minutes for people to create their positioning statements.
Wow, that's something very actionable. So it's
Mhm.
doable. It's doable.
100%. Yeah.
As you are talking, I'm thinking about the example of, and this leads to another topic. One of the projects that I did in 2017, so a long time ago, was a payroll migration that involved Workday. I haven't had a resume out for years. I still get recruiters reaching out to me because it's hard to find project managers who have Workday implementation and implementation experience. Now, the other part of that is because I had only done one, uh, I undersold to myself my ability to do that again. I thought, well, I'm not really a Workday expert. People would send that, and I discounted my own ability to do that. And I think that's something else that oftentimes project managers do, because we put so much stock in credentials, we put so much stock in the technical aspects, the expertise, the subject matter expertise, and we really don't think about, oh, wait, at the end of the day, I delivered something that was valuable and I would be able to do it again. So do you see that, and how do you help people get over that?
I see I see a little broader view of that. I see people just completely discrediting all of their project management experience
Where do you
because
think that
I
comes from?
Yes. So I specifically help career transitioners. I think it's a couple things. First of all, it doesn't fit PMI standards. What they've been doing doesn't sound like what PMI says project management is. And I
Mhm.
think as project managers, you and I both know that no project is ever going to run by a PMI like standard. The way
Never,
things are
never.
supposed to be, right? Exactly. Wouldn't it be great if it did?
I don't know. I kind of like them the way they are.
It's true. It would be so boring if it just
It
like
would,
hung and
yes.
yeah. So I think particularly because I have career transitioners and they kind of look to PMI and the PMP and the PMBOK and all of these standards as the gold standard, which they are, but then they compare their own experience to it and they're like, well, this doesn't look like what they're saying project management should be. And my response to that is actually what I do is not at all similar to what PMI says that I'm supposed to do. Like, I just make sure that things get done. I move people forward, whatever it takes to move those people forward, then that is what I do. That's what I'm good at, is getting people to take action and do things. And there's a lot of skills that PMI can't really teach that go along with that.
Yes.
Another thing I really focus on with my particular, the people that I work with, is the definition of a project. Start date, end date, results in something unique. That's it. And if
Yeah.
you have led something like that, I don't care how many people were a part of it. I don't care how much money it was worth. It was a project. So what I would like to hear from you is kind of from that perspective of from a career transitioner and why they discount these sorts of things. What are you seeing, or what was your own experience in, you know, this doesn't count because X, Y, and Z, like fill in the blank. Why doesn't that count? Why can't you do it again?
Right. I think it was that PMI thing, and I think it was um, there is a structural problem with the way the practice and hiring works. Because the PMP has been so successful, now it is the de facto standard. And if I'm a hiring manager and I know nothing about project management, I at least know, okay, I should be looking for someone, or I think I should be looking for someone with a PMP. And then I go to Claude and I need to write a requisition so that the recruiter can go out and look for this person. So I go to Claude and Claude says, here's what a general project manager does. And here's the standard industry years of experience and skills that your project manager needs. Because I don't know, right? I'm just trying to come up with something that I can put out there. And so it comes up with this long list of things you're going to do that are based on the standards. You're going to run steering committees. You're going to write charters. You are going to develop Gantt charts. You're going to maintain risk registers. And all of that is in there. And none of the people who are screening your resume know what any of that means. And that's on the requisition. So they're going to ask you about it.
Mhm.
And because your experience doesn't neatly fit into those boxes, they ask you about it, and you're like, I don't know. I've never done a charter. Well, you've probably done charter-like things over and over and over again. But then if I try to say, oh yeah, I've done a charter before, but it had this format, the worry is they'll be like, they're not really being straightforward with us. They're just trying to shoehorn their experience into real project management when they've been doing real project management.
Yeah.
That is a real problem. And this is why what you do, Kayla, where you're focusing on what was the impact? What did you do? What did you achieve? Because I don't care what methodology you use, that achievement, those words that are results, resonate with everybody. And
Mhm.
if you're confident in that and you keep bringing the conversation back to that, here's how I got these results. Don't worry about the terminology, it doesn't matter.
Exactly. It totally
Yes.
doesn't.
How do you
And
help people?
yes, so we're here to talk about the hidden gaps, right? One of these gaps that I have identified in my work with career transitioners and being a career coach is there is a trust gap. And I'm going to guess that for you and your work and what you do with people, Cheri, it's the same thing. Because how do
Absolutely.
you get trusted with larger projects, with more complex stakeholders, with larger scope? How do you get trust enough to move from PM to senior PM to senior manager of project management or whatever that next step might be? How do you gain enough trust to make a lateral move to another company? How do you gain enough trust to get your first project management title? And I think we call this positioning, and it is, but positioning is a lot of things, and trust is
Mhm.
just one element of that. So what I really see, there are two trust gaps. There's in what I do. So I'm sure there's different trust gaps in what you do. So for me, the first trust gap is from application to interview. And if you are applying and you're not getting interviews, you are not generating enough trust with probably the recruiter at this point. And that's what we need to look at. What is it about the way you're positioning yourself that is undermining that trust or is not creating that trust, that is connecting the dots for the recruiter that I can obviously do this job very well? The second trust gap comes from interview to offer. So if you're
Mhm.
getting interviews and you're not getting offers, then what is happening there is something in the way you're communicating is not demonstrating that you can do that hiring managers projects in their environment with their stakeholders and probably in their culture as well. So, and again, it's kind of taking a look at what is undermining my trust. So, is that something that you're seeing in your work with the people you work with?
Yes, and that emphasis on our expertise is one of the things, oddly enough, that undermines that trust. Because what it makes us do is want to give everybody, I've got a list of 15 credentials after my name. And I think that that's what's going to make them trust me. But actually, it's the opposite that it does. And that seems weird and a little bit unfair because I worked so hard to know all this stuff. But they don't care about how much you know. They care about what you can do to help them. That is all. And if I am thinking about how do I make them see how much I know, I can be thinking at the same time about what is their problem, what do they need help with, and how do I help solve it? And to generate trust, that is the most important thing, especially in a hiring situation. They see that you understand their situation. They don't care about you.
Right?
I
Yeah,
mean that in a very,
it's true.
that's just how the world works,
Yeah.
right? Like they only care about you to the extent in an interview situation that they see that you can connect what you do with what they need. And if I'm only thinking about how I look smart or, how I talk about myself without linking it to them and showing that I understand their context, I lose that trust. And that is such an important thing to understand. So, oddly enough, if I kind of set aside my worries about am I credentialed enough? Do I have the right experience? And instead, I think about okay, what are they experiencing that they need help with? And understanding that as much as possible before I go into a conversation. And this is with clients, interviews, anything like that, where people you need to establish that trust. It has to be first and foremost about putting yourself in their shoes. Oddly enough, this is another area where differentiation helps because the more that I know about a particular area, the more I can just off the top of my head know what their problems are without having to ask them.
Yes, yes, that's a really good point. And I want to come back to the credentials thing because you have a very interesting, unique perspective on it. And I want to just touch a little bit more on this concept of trust because I read this book recently called The Trusted Advisor. And I'm not going to lie, it's really dry. But the most valuable thing that I took away from it was the trust equation. And that is, it's three things. It is reliability plus credibility plus emotional safety, like how much emotional safety can you create? And it's all divided by self-orientation. And everything that you were talking about right there about jargon, credentials, focused on me and what I can do, that's self-orientation. And I know it seems like that's, I mean, clearly, if you need a job, you are self-oriented. And I'm not asking anyone to forget about that in any way. What I am asking them to do is think about their priorities. Do you want a job or are you interested in just promoting yourself? Because those are two different things. And if your top priority is getting a job, then we need to develop trust, which means being less self-oriented. What do you need, hiring manager? What are your issues? What is your environment like? So, and how can I demonstrate to you that I am concerned about what's happening for you? I have experience in this area and I can fix it. Because again, you get 30 minutes to an hour, maybe, with a hiring manager. If you're sitting in front of them, they know that you're capable. That's already been established. It's
Yes.
much more at this point about just making sure that you're going to be a good fit for my projects in my environment with my stakeholders. So, this idea of credentials. Okay, the trust equation, reliability, credibility plus emotional safety. This is the credibility
Mhm.
aspect, credentials. And there's a lot of things that can create credibility, but credentials is just one of them. And I have my PMP. I keep my PMP up to date. I also have a Lean Six Sigma black belt, but like nobody cares about it. I know that you have let your PMP lapse. So I want to hear the story around what led you to do that, your thought process around it, and what you tell other people about certifications and credentials in the project management space.
So I first have, and this is me establishing credibility from that. I have all of the right acronyms after my name, but I put a lot of stock into it. So I actually got my PMP in 2006, and then I got my PGMP in 2013. And those were both very important to me, and for a long time, a core part of how I defined myself. But the PGMP, nobody knew what it was. I was glad that I got it because I learned a lot in doing that, and I was able to use those concepts. But from a career perspective, I'm not sure it did very much for me because I didn't have a specific need. And this is where I go to whether or not you get a credential, whether or not you keep a credential. For me now, it is opportunity cost. If I'm doing all the paperwork to maintain my credential, I'm not doing something else. And I wanted to do other things. But for someone who's thinking about that question, do I get one or not? I would suggest doing an actual value analysis where you try to the extent possible, incorporate all the intangibles you can. This is what I mean. If I don't have a job identified that needs a PMP that I want to move to, so say I want to apply for a job, it's a better job than the one I have now, I would get a bump in salary and it requires a PMP. There's a very clear case for that. I have all the other things, I just need the PMP. But if there's just this vague sense that I would have more opportunities available to me if I had a PMP, then I would say, no, don't do it, because there might be other ways for you to spend your time where you're networking, where you're working on being visible and known in a particular area. where you are brushing up your leadership skills instead of just project management skills. There's all kinds of ways that you can move forward in your career that might be actually more beneficial and have a better return on investment. So you have to know the specific mechanisms. You can't just be like, I hope to get my PMP and then I hope things will be better. I haven't seen that work out great for anybody.
Yes. And I want to talk a little bit about this framework that I came up with, which is the project management readiness iron triangle. Because we love iron triangles, right? We love triangles as project managers. And we all know, most of us know, the concept of the actual iron triangle, which is balancing scope, schedule, and cost, right? You have to balance these things for a quality project. So in my project management readiness iron triangle, we balance three things: experience, credentials, and network. Now, what I tell the people that I work with is they need to be strong in at least two of these, because over optimizing for any one does not help. It's where these three things overlap, that's what creates trust. And the more that you can balance those three things out, the better the trust is that you can create. Now, when you overlap two of these things, that it's also increased trust. And again, if you only have one of them, like if you over optimize for credentials, there's nothing else that's creating that trust there. And I'm going to bring this back to what you were saying, because you were saying it's about the opportunity cost, right? If I'm getting my PMP or whatever that is, then maybe it's costing me time where I could be brushing up on my leadership skills, times I could be networking, things like that. And I absolutely agree with that. Where I see this as a little nuanced for me is I'm never submitting paperwork or spending a ton of time renewing my PMP, but here's why. I am so active in the project management community, in PMI events, in what I do at my job, in just kind of keeping up with project management because I legitimately like it. I'm such a nerd. I never have to worry about my PMP lapsing or expiring. The continued with the PDUs are just always there for me. But because of that, it's closely tied to networking. And again, when you have networking and credentials that are so closely tied, that is there's more trust that is created there. So I completely hear you around the paperwork and all of that. My perspective is just like slightly nuanced because I think of how much of a nerd I am.
I want to talk about the networking because there are multiple ways that factors in, right?
Yeah.
So if you're thinking of networking as just meeting the people who are going to give me opportunities, you're not thinking about it the right way. So business at the end of the day, and I don't care what kind of business you're in, what you do, it's really about relationships. We have relationships, and not parasocial relationships, or not where everybody knows me, but where I know someone else, and there are real interactions and there are exchanges of value. This is what business at the end of the day is based on, regardless of what you're doing. And so I have to know how to establish real relationships. I need to practice and be intentional in thinking about how is this relationship balanced. It's not just about me going out and meeting people who can give me a job. It is about going out and meeting people who benefit from the interaction with me, and I benefit from the interaction with them. And there are lots of ways that we can do that. There's opportunities, of course, but there's also perspective. And this is where, when you're going into the interview or, a meeting with a potential client or anybody, the more that you know about their specific environment, the better. Now, if I already know because I've been doing a particular kind of project management and I can just kind of guess what their environment is, that's great. But if I don't, then my network is one of those key ways that I'm going to gather that information and say, what is it like at this company? What are this company's goals? What are the things that they're struggling with? What is this industry facing? I can do that research, but talking with people is so much better. This is one of the key things that a network does with you, is it provides perspective that you cannot get any other way. And that goes both ways too. You provide perspective for other people, they provide perspective for you. And so that's one reason, just one of many reasons, that networking is so important.
Yeah, there's this value exchange, right? And it's so interesting because when people are thinking about networking, they're like, I don't have any value to offer. Yes,
Right.
you do.
You
It
do.
might just not be explicitly, oh, you might not be explicitly aware of it at the time, but just simply going and asking people, like, hey, what's your experience in this area? One simple question. People love talking about themselves. They truly do. And it particularly if you're asking about them, right? This isn't anything about, hey, I need a job. Hey, I'm having this challenge. Just, I want to understand something. I think what you're speaking to here is closing that trust gap because now you know more about that environment and that specific area and you're niching down. Like, again, I am very involved in the legal project management community specifically, so I'm super just in touch with what is happening in that realm. I'm very niche down, and it means that I know more about what my manager wants and needs, what my firm wants and needs, and I become that much more valuable. I think what is so hard about networking, well, there's two things. There's that feeling like you are like begging or needing something and just not really understanding how to flip that script, which is what you were talking about.
Mhm.
And there's also, this is not a fast thing.
Yeah.
Networking is a slow burn and it takes time. And there are nuanced ways that you can make it pay dividends much faster. And I work with my clients on that. But this is one of those dig the well before it's dry sort of
Mhm.
things. If
Mhm.
you are networking because you needed a job yesterday, you are not doing it right. And I know that networking is uncomfortable. Every single person that comes to me to work with me, networking is the lowest side of their iron triangle because nobody wants to do it. So that's kind of, if no one takes anything away from today other than that, please start networking. Please. Like go to an event.
And do it with intention. So, and
Yes.
there are ways to, by intention, I mean, learn how to network. It is a skill. It's not something that comes naturally to most of us. And it needs to be done with a particular purpose in mind. If I reach out to someone and they don't respond, that feels yucky. If I reach out to 10 people and I expect one of them to respond and one of them responds, then okay, I feel all right about that because that's how it goes. So you have to know what the reasonable expectations are. You have to have a little bit of guidance in how to do that so that it doesn't feel just transactional. And to know if you're doing it well, right? If it is standard to reach out to 10 people and only one person responds, if I don't know that, I'm going to give up after 9 people and miss that 10th person.
Ooh. Oh, that's such a good point. I've really never thought about setting expectations up front for what the actual return on your investment actually is. And I bet it probably is 1 in 10. That
Probably
sounds
closer
about
to that.
right.
Yeah,
Especially in this day and age.
absolutely. Because we're all overwhelmed with so many different, asks and input, and it's a lot.
Yeah.
But it is a skill. There are books out there. We have Jerome Neumann is someone who has written a couple of books on networking. We have him come in and talk to us. His series is called Invisible to Valuable, and he's
Heard
not a
of that.
project manager, but he makes it very actionable, and we all learn from that. It makes it easier. Having reasonable expectations for how people respond, what you have to say, how much effort you have to put into it, that it takes multiple uh, interactions to develop trust. It doesn't happen just like that. All of those things are important to know. So, Kayla, more than anybody I think I've met, you are intentional about how you do things. So definitely who you want to meet and what you need to know from them might be one thing that guides how you do your outreach or how you network. What else has governed the intent that you put behind your networking efforts?
I think for me, it truly is a genuine curiosity and wanting to learn.
Mhm.
And I will say not everybody is like that, and I understand that. But for me, it is truly because of that reason. I wish, Cheri, that I could remember how you and I actually got connected. I'm sure I could go back and figure it out. Like, do you remember?
I think it was, I do outreach to invite people to my networking events, and then I think you came to one of my networking events.
Okay, all right. And what I think is so interesting about that is, we're both coaches in the career or in the project management space, right? And you and I could look at each other and say, that's competition. This person, I'm competing with this person for coaching in the project management space. And like even the look on your face, you're like, what? Like, no, we're not competition. And it's so interesting because I think to you and me, that's obvious because we met, we clicked, we're exchanging information between the two of us, information flows, referrals flow, ideas flow, and now we're sitting here having a conversation with each other, hoping to create value for other people.
And they're
And
planning other things too, right?
yes, yes, exactly, exactly. So I think it's just, I mean, I met you and I was genuinely curious about what you were doing, and you were offering something, right? A
Mhm.
networking event that I was like, oh, that's interesting. I want to learn. I'm genuinely curious about what other people say about networking, even though I would say I'm pretty good at networking. So just that curiosity and that willingness to not see other people as competition, because I've heard that too. Like, oh, if I go talk to other, I don't know, healthcare ERP implementation PMs, aren't they just going to see me as competition? Every now and then, sure, someone with an
Yeah.
unhealthy outlook on life might see you that way, and you probably don't want to be associated with them anyway. That's how
That's
I
right.
kind of
I
how
no,
I
I
view that.
agree. We forget humans are social animals. We need interaction. It is very important for our well-being to have interaction with other people. So just the very act of meeting someone and being like, oh yeah, they get me, that is hugely beneficial to have that. And so I do think that that idea that people are going to see you as competition is, I don't see it that much. And, you know, of course, it's self-selecting, right? I'm out there and the people who respond to me are the ones who are also wanting to network.
Of
Um,
course, yeah.
but I will say also, I am a very strong introvert by nature and painfully shy up until probably my early 30s. And so it's something I've had to really, really work on. So if this is you too, I understand that not everyone is a social butterfly. Not all of us feel comfortable talking in groups. It is still very painful for me in a group to raise my hand and ask a
Yeah.
question because I do not want everybody that I do not know looking at me.
Yeah.
So I understand that, and I understand it takes time, and you just have to make yourself do it and practice. And I will say, just like Kayla is driven by that curiosity, despite my introversion and my shyness, I love people.
Mhm.
And that's what motivates me. So find your motivation. I think people are so interesting and so wonderful. And I have enjoyed so much all of the project managers that I've met through my work. So
Yeah.
find your motivation, find your why, and
Yep.
use that to drive you in your networking efforts, especially if it is something that is difficult for you.
Absolutely. That motivation is probably the hidden gap when it comes to networking, right? And I think what is so important to understand too, I love psychology. I dig into the psychology of stuff a lot because if I understand it, that kind of helps me see it from a different perspective and approach it a little bit differently. I see this as like a root cause analysis, like psychology. It was almost that way for me. And what you're talking about in being an introvert and, it's terrifying to raise your hand. I will say, first of all, actually, the older that I've gotten, the more introverted that I've gotten. So,
That's interesting.
yeah, it is interesting to kind of see the evolution there and get more empathetic to how that feels for people. So, this concept of, we're tribe people, you already mentioned that. Our brains have developed to create relationships, live in tribes. The reason that networking and putting yourself out there for everybody to look at you is so scary is because let's say you send out ten requests to connect and you're expecting one and you don't get it. That feels like rejection. And back in the day, when we live in tribes and we needed our tribe to survive, if we got rejected and kicked out, we died. And our brains are still wired for that.
Yeah.
And I think it's helpful to understand that because I will encourage people to actively, I'll explain this, and then I'll say, you are not going to die from networking. Your brain is telling you that you might, and you're not.
This
And
is true.
just that kind of helps sometimes for people to almost understand what is happening internally and kind of coach themselves through it. So if that helps anybody, I really hope that they can take that away. But that certainly seems to work for some people that I talk to.
I think understanding it does help because we can, one, cut ourselves a little bit of slack for the way we feel. Understand that's just very natural. And then know that that feeling's not going to go away until we teach it otherwise. Once you have a little bit of success, then you start to realize, okay, rejection does not equal death. And I can continue to move forward. One other thing that I want to say that I think makes things difficult for project managers is we have a tendency to think I should be able to plan all of this out. And I'm going to have my plan. And I've even seen this where, been in situations where they say, do your 6-month plan for networking and everything else. And everybody writes it. And then after week 3, it all falls apart and nobody follows through. In this particular area, when you're in an area that is either chaotic or there's a high level of uncertainty, and the link between what you do and what happens is not always clear.
Yeah.
It makes it very difficult to have that kind of plan. So an easier way sometimes to move forward is this is why we do experiments in the Radical Projects Collective, because you just do one thing. You say, I'm here, I want to be here. If I were here, can't see my hands. If I were here to where you wanted to be, then this is how I would be acting. These are the things I would be doing. This is what I would be experiencing. I'm going to take one thing and I'm going to try that and move just that step. And then I'm going to react. Did it work? Did it not work? Do I have to adjust a little bit? And that's how we move forward a little bit at a time in a sustainable way, because you get the successes. If you don't get the successes, you're adjusting. And it makes it a little bit easier to get from point A to point B over a period of time.
Yes. And you just described agile project management.
Yep.
Try something, do an iteration, and at the end, ask what went well, what didn't go so great, and what should I do differently going forward, and then adjust. And I know not all project managers are comfortable with agile methodologies. Some people are just like, nope, I need to know the plan, I need to know what's going next. But this is a way of managing a project that is unpredictable, and networking is unpredictable.
Yeah. And it's odd because you start with the goal, right? And as you learn, you might change the goal to be something that reflects what you're actually learning. That's okay too. But start with the goal, move in that direction, adjust, do what Kayla says.
Yeah. Yeah. One other point I'm going to make about networking is I do think it is okay to state your intentions sometimes. Not, I need a job, but this is a little more nuanced. So when I started networking, I started going to conferences. That's, pretty normal things to do when you're networking. And I took it one step further. I decided I wanted to speak at these conferences because, again, if you're creating value for people, if you're speaking, then, that again, it's just more of a networking opportunity. People see you more, they want to talk to you more, they think you have value to offer. And I went to my first conference and I said, I was telling people, like, I would love to speak at this one time. Like, this is so interesting. I'm really getting a lot out of it. And sure enough, after like 6 months after that conference, someone I talked to reached out to me and said, "Hey, do you want to speak with me?" Heck yes, I do. And now I've spoken at that conference 3 years in a row. And, the first year I was on a panel. The second year I pitched and created my own panel. This year I pitched and I'm speaking on my own. So it's just like this evolution of things because I made my intentions known.
I
And I think
I don't think
things
there's
like that.
anything
And
wrong with saying what your goals are. I really don't. And there's a difference between will you, I just met you, will you do this thing for me?
yes.
And the other person's like, I don't know you from Adam. Why would I do that?
Yeah.
There's a big difference between that and someone coming and saying, I am so interested in this. Genuinely, don't make it up. But I saw that you're talking about this. I'm kind of crazy about the same thing, and I'm a nerd in this particular area and would love to talk to you about it.
Yeah.
Be genuine, but share
Yes.
yourself, be authentic, and don't be afraid to say what you want. What are your goals? What are you working towards? Just like you did with the conference.
Yeah.
That's genuinely understood and appreciated.
100%. And to what you said, like people can smell
Yeah,
inauthenticity from a mile away. They
yeah.
know it. And something I hear a lot from the people that I coach when it comes to networking, when it comes to interviewing, when it comes to all of these things, it feels inauthentic. It feels like I'm not being myself. And my response to that is, do you behave the same way with your mother, the same way that you behave with your best friend?
Of course
Probably
not.
not.
Yeah,
Of course not, right? That's still an authentic version of you. It's just contextualized.
yeah,
So that's the same concept here, is that's how I see it.
yeah. No, I agree. I agree. You are going to act a certain way, but you're not going to try to, in one of our Pathfinders lab units, we talk about the difference between manipulative and persuasive communication.
Yeah.
And manipulative communication is when you're trying to conceal your motivation. And persuasive communication is when you're being upfront about what your motivation is. It's okay to want things. That's fine. But just be open about what it is that you want, and don't try to make it look something different than it is.
Yes. And if we're talking about that trust equation, again, if you are concealing things and being manipulative, that is not emotional safety for
Right.
people. And it's very self-oriented. So that just erodes it very, very quickly. And people are not going to trust you and you're not going to be effective as a project manager as a result.
Yep, exactly. So the confidence is, yes, I see people coming to me very accomplished. And because other people have told them you're not enough,
Mhm.
and we've internalized that. And it happens so much
Yeah.
in today's world. It's rough out there.
It's sad.
And not very many people work in environments where they are told how valuable they are.
Mhm.
So this is something where I think reflective journaling is really important
Mm.
to build your own reservoir of confidence, because you have to tell yourself. It cannot come from other people. Now, I do think that groups, like having a group that you're routinely going back to for support, is a big part of that, because that perspective, right? Someone saying, wow, you did that, and someone who knows what it takes to do that, that is immensely gratifying and supportive.
Mhm.
And when, you run into a problem and someone says, oh, they really shouldn't have done that, that's also very gratifying and very supportive.
Yeah.
So if you can find a group, project managers, to talk to on a regular basis, do that. Super important. And then
100%.
do some, and this seems weird, but do some reflective journaling where you're asking yourself, and I actually ask Claude for prompts.
Uh,
You know,
yeah.
I want to develop this part of myself. Can you give me some prompts where I can reflect on my attitudes and my beliefs? And it's not content, and we don't do that often where we're reflecting on how do I think, what shapes me. Why do I respond this way is a question that I ask a lot.
Yeah. Oh,
This
yeah.
thing happened, now why would this would be a good question. Why would I, where I had a very successful run as a project manager for payroll implementation that used Workday, why would I not think that I would be a good Workday project manager? That's a really good question to think about.
Yeah, it really is. Love that.
And so, yeah, that I think that building confidence comes from a little bit of introspection and then a good dose of perspective from other people. Because a lot of us aren't going to get it at work.
Yeah. It's so hard to ask for help or ask for advice at work because some cultures are legitimately not safe enough to do that. And I mean, that just feels terrible, particularly when maybe you're a new project manager or a first-time project manager. You just joined the organization. I mean, you certainly don't want to seem like you don't know what you're doing, right? Which is kind of a reason that people don't ask for help. So, to your point of having a group of people that you can go to and say, hey, I'm facing this challenge. Can you give me some advice? What would you do in this situation? And I know you and I both have communities of project managers for exactly this. I believe that networking is so important. So that's, part of the reason that I stood it up. And I think it's an extra added value to ask people for feedback and support. One of the first things I did when I realized I had no network is I created my own mastermind of people. And,
I think that's fantastic.
we could do a whole, session on networking. I think you and I just going deep dive into it, but I knew I needed people to ask questions. And now these people are just really close to me, but that really massively helped with my confidence.
Yeah. I think a mastermind group of some kind is one of the best things, most impactful things that someone can do. And it does take a little bit of time to figure it out. But yeah, that kind of perspective is golden.
Absolutely. Yeah. Is there anything else that we want to cover today?
I think we have a good, I think we've covered everything.
Fantastic. All right, Cheri, it is always such a pleasure to talk to you. I always get new perspectives, new little tidbits to think about. So thank you so much for your time today.
It is a pleasure talking with you. I hope we get a chance to do this again.
Yeah. Before we hop off here, Cheri, where can people find you?
I am at Creveco, CREV as in Victor, AYCO.com. And if you go to members.creveco.com, you can sign up for our community, which is free. And we keep it pretty active. We have a couple of networking events every month. We have a theme every month. We have a definite plan behind what we do. It's not just for coming in and talking about project management. It's how do I move forward? What's getting me stuck in my career or my work? And how do I find the next thing that I want to find?
Love it. And I will make sure that when I post this, I put all of that in the show notes and the materials that I send around. For me, you can get me at kaylaqcareercoaching.com. So KAYLA, Q as in Queen, careercoaching.com. You can also follow me on LinkedIn, and I also have my own space for project managers to connect and learn and share ideas, and I will also put a link to that in the show notes.
I hope to get to meet some people who have watched this. Like I said, I love it.
Yeah, exactly. We're both kind of project management nerds in this space, so we vibe in that way. So thank you again, Cheri. So great seeing you. And
Pleasure.
yes, I hope we do this again.
Thanks for the opportunity, Kayla. Take care.